Iris drove her brand new car through the city centre, singing along to the radio. The singer crooned about love, fidelity and separation from her beloved. This theme always touched the deepest strings of Iris's kind soul, though fate had deprived her of true love and fidelity. But for now she was rushing to meet a potential client, so her mood was quite high. There was a traffic jam at the exit from the bridge to the wide avenue. 10 o'clock in the morning, 4-lane road, not rush hour, and how could there be a traffic jam? I don't want to be late, Iris said worriedly and got out of the car. Several cars ahead, a huge man with a bald head and bulldog face was arguing loudly with an elderly, frail man sitting behind the wheel of an old wrecking car. "You made a sharp left without signalling. How could I have anticipated such a manoeuvre? There's a sign here. Turning left is forbidden." The elderly man tried to justify himself. "Do you have a video recorder? So how do you prove it? Let's not call the police. Just pay for my repairs and go on your way. You don't have insurance. It could cost you a lot of money." The brazen man in the SUV started to threaten. "Oh, come on," Iris intervened in the dispute, looking very convincing. "Look, your SUV is facing left, blocking both lanes. Moreover, the turn was made against a forbidden sign and from the rightmost lane. Otherwise, how do you explain the car's position? The bumper's scratched right at the bend on the left. Do you think anyone would believe that an old Ford could turn a 2-ton SUV around with a light touch?" Iris suddenly took out several large bills from her purse and put them into the large hand of a bulb man with a bulldog-like face. "I hope this will be enough to fix the bumper. Please stop arguing. People are rushing, especially me. Otherwise, I'll call my lawyer, and we'll see who's right and who's wrong." The driver of the SUV wanted to object, but Iris's resolute speech and his own guilt in the accident stopped him from further proceedings and threats against the old taxi driver. He silently got into his huge car and drove away. "My darling, I'll give you everything," whispered the unhappy elderly man, almost in tears. He took Iris's hand in his heavy hands and even tried to kiss it, but she pulled her hand away. "Come on, I'm just very late and could lose much more because of this delay. Also, I'm all for justice. Be more careful in the future and get insurance, or you really will be left without pants," she said with a smile and got into her car. Driving a few 100 meters from the scene of the accident and reflecting on what had happened, she suddenly remembered the moment when the poor old man, out of gratitude, tried to kiss her hand. Iris had noticed the terrible scar on his hand even then, but hadn't paid much attention to it. Now it seemed to her that she had seen it somewhere before. His slightly creaky voice also seemed painfully familiar to her. She even pulled over to the side of the road to remember. God, it's been so many years. I don't even remember the license plate number now. What a fool I am. She turned back, but the scene of the accident was not visible behind the flow of cars, and it was unlikely that the elderly man was still standing there. "I'll find you, Peter, for sure. You're the kindest man in the world. It was you. There's no doubt about it." Thinking about this, Iris even wept, but then she pulled herself together, wiped the mascara under her eyes, and hurried to the meeting. She always recalled her childhood with a shudder. Her family lived in a small provincial town, with a city-forming enterprise, where her father worked, and one hotel where her mother worked. Their wages were often delayed and small. In addition, her father often drank and threw her and her mother out of the house. They lived in a small apartment that hadn't been renovated in decades. Old, faded wallpaper hung down in places, a reminder of floods and freezing temperatures. Her father, who was already frowning and drunk, began to raise his hand against his wife and daughter. Sometimes, Iris and her mother, Heather, spent the night at the home of a kind neighbour, Peter, who worked as a forester. Iris's father even tried to fight with him a few times, but Peter was much older and did not give in, even threatening to turn the troublemaker over to the police. When Iris was 11 years old, her father died of alcohol intoxication. Peter was a widower. His wife died right after his son Simon was born. They had not had children for a long time, and had already resigned themselves to being childless. They often babysat the neighbourhood children. His wife Mandy worked as a seamstress, but she loved to read, and the neighbourhood children loved to come to their yard to listen to her tell fairy tales and stories she had read in her childhood and youth. By the age of 40, realising that they would not have their own children, Peter and Mandy were about to adopt a child from an orphanage. But suddenly, one day at work in the sewing shop, Mandy became ill. She felt nauseous and almost fainted. The heat and being behind the machine all day long, anyone can get unwell. Mandy complained about the poor labour conditions and lack of a good ventilation in the sewing shop. A week later, she was sitting in the doctor's office, feeling very uncomfortable. She was almost 40, her husband was older, and she was vomiting like a student with alcohol poisoning. "So, lady, are we going to have a baby? Or is it a little late for that?" "I wouldn't advise it. You have a weak heart. It's all written in your medical card about your heart. You've lived so many years without children, and what if something happens? The child will be left without a mother." "I'll give birth. If something bad happens, I have a good husband, and my parents are not yet old. They will be the people to raise the child," said Mandy firmly, and jumped out of the doctor's office. Peter was waiting for her in the clinic lobby. "Honey, we're going to have a baby! A baby!" shouted Mandy, almost running down the wide corridor of the old provincial hospital. Peter was crying, not even hiding his tears from the staff and patients around him. He picked up his wife in his arms and began to twirl her around. "Come on, stop, please. I'm already dizzy. Put me on the ground or I'll pass out. Actually, I want pickles, cherries, and lemon waffles," Mandy demanded, laughing and tenderly kissing her husband. March was warm and sunny that year. Peter often went to the forest to feed the deer that were starving after a long cold winter. He did not enjoy hunting, though he went with an old rifle for safety. A couple of years ago he met a bear that woke up early after hibernation. He had never gone into the woods without a gun since. In the forest lake on the border of the forestry department where Peter served, the ice was still firm, although the temperature had broken all records recently. At the height of the day, it reached +5 and even more. Weekend fishermen came to the lake like locusts to fish on the last ice. Sometimes they stayed overnight in the forest hut right at the edge of the forest. Peter didn't mind that the fishermen had almost taken up residence in his forest hut, and he didn't even lock the door. He only warned them not to overheat the stove, otherwise there would be trouble because the forest was close by. One sunny day, when the forester once again went to put fodder in the moose nursery, there was a smell of smoke from afar. Probably the fishermen are coming for their catch again, Peter thought, unwinding a bale of hay. Then he heard a crackling sound and saw a column of grey smoke in the distance. When the forester ran to the place where the smoke was coming from, the forest hut was already burning, and the forest was on fire with it. It was a long way to go for help, and there was no one around. Probably the fishermen saw what they had done and ran away. Peter realized it at once from the tracks. He started pelting the hut with snow, went down to the lake several times, and drew water from the holes left by the fishermen, scooping it up with a big mug and pouring it into a bucket he found near the hut. Luckily, the smoke was noticed by some tourists nearby. They called for help. However, Peter was injured. His jacket caught fire. He managed to throw it off, but his skin was burned a little. Arrived firemen extinguished the fire, and the heroic forester was taken to the local hospital with burns and other wounds. Mandy was 8 months pregnant, and some not intelligent neighbour called to her, "Oh, what a sorrow! Peter has burned down, he's dead!" The births began prematurely and spontaneously. Mandy barely had time to get to the hospital before she gave birth to a frail, premature baby boy, who didn't even cry right away. When they tried to move the boy away, Mandy passed away before she even realized she was already a mother. No matter how the resuscitator and obstetrician tried to start her heart, it remained silent, without making a single knock. So, together with the news of the birth of his son, the forester received his first powerful slap from fate. For some time, the baby was kept in the paediatric ward due to prematurity and low weight, and the father was treated for burns and emotional wounds. But finally, Peter and his newborn son were discharged on the same day. "We have such a hard fate, Simon, and we can't change anything, so we have to live somehow," the forester said to his son, resignedly, when the nurse handed the baby to him. "No one can replace your mum, and I won't find a wife like that again, nor will I. But I'll raise you myself, don't worry, we'll manage." And so they lived. The neighbours helped the new father and raised Simon together. The boy grew up handsome like his mother, with cornflower-coloured eyes and hair curling around his forehead and temples. He was smart, went to school early, and spoke ahead of his peers. Peter was very fond of him. He reminded him so much of his wife. 2.5 years later, in an apartment on the first floor of the apartment building, Iris was born, and baby's clothes, blankets and bonnets from the forester's apartment on the 3rd floor moved to the apartment on the 1st floor. Times were hard. Iris's mother accepted any help from the kind-hearted neighbour upstairs. Iris grew up a healthy and strong girl, despite the difficult times, the eternal drunken scandals of her father. When Iris was 10 years old, her father died of drunkenness. The family's scandals stopped, but their finances collapsed. Sometimes they had nothing to eat for dinner, and Peter would bring a can of stew, a packet of pasta and vegetables. "Make some soup for your little one. It's bad without hot food. I'll get my paycheck tomorrow and we'll go to the store together. Don't refuse. Simon needs to buy sandals and I don't know anything about it. Mandy's mother used to help me choose, heaven rest her soul. But now all hope is in you, Heather." Peter was lying, of course. Simon was 13 and could have chosen his own clothes and shoes. But the forester knew that Iris's last shoes had long ago torn, and her toes were sticking out through the holes. So they would go to the store and buy shoes and clothes for both children. Then they would go to a cafe, eat ice cream and drink sweet sodas. They'd walk around the park, ride the merry-go-round, and in the evening they'd come home so happy, as if there was no chaos in the country and everyone had enough money for life and entertainment. Peter was old enough to be Iris's grandfather and treated her with fatherly tenderness and reverence, feeling very sorry for them both, knowing that there was no one to help Heather, the orphan. The forestry job had a good salary, and it was paid on time, so Heather, Iris's mother, often asked Peter for a loan when her husband drank most of his earnings. "I will grow up and be rich," little Iris often said. "I'll take care of you and Mum when you're old. I'll feed you like in a restaurant, and then we'll go to the sea for a vacation." "Peter, have you ever been to the sea? My Mum and I haven't, and by the way, Simon will be my husband, and he won't be able to call me a baby any more." Iris dreamed, sitting on a bench near Peter, while her mother was on night duty at the local hotel. "And what if Simon doesn't want to marry you? You've got freckles all over your nose, and you fight with him all the time," laughed the neighbour. "Who's going to ask him? I'll tell him to get married, and he will. And if he doesn't, he'll get a punch in the nose," answered the perky Iris, even clenching her little hands into fists. Peter laughed heartily and stroked the girl's silky hair, which was tied in 2 thick and long braids. Time passed, and soon Heather was offered a good job in another district town. She was a laboratory technician by education, and there was no such job in her town. So she worked in a hotel, and sometimes worked part-time in a nearby cafe as a dishwasher at night. "What about Peter and Simon? How will we live without them?" Iris asked while her mother packed things into boxes. "We will visit them. I was offered an office apartment there, and we'll sell this apartment to pay off our debts. We owe 3 banks, not to mention Peter's debts. We can't live off other people's money anymore. It's not right," Mum said with grit and determination. When Iris and her mother drove away, Peter shed a stingy, manly tear, and Simon ran after the car, which took away a part of his life in the person of Iris and her mother. Iris and her mother moved to a developing city of chemists. Heather got a job as a laboratory technician at a company that produced detergents. She liked the work, and the staff immediately accepted the young and pretty woman. They helped her as much as they could, knowing that Heather was alone and raising her child by herself. The company had a multi-block house with small apartments that were rented to workers for a reasonable fee. Heather got a cosy, bright room overlooking the square. The school where Iris was enrolled was only a couple of blocks away. It seemed like they could live happily, but the girl missed Peter and Simon very much. "Mum, I'm bored here. I miss Peter and Simon so much. How are they without us? Who will bake them apple cinnamon pie and blueberry cheesecakes? They probably eat only fried potatoes and pasta with stew. Mum, let's go to them on vacation," added Iris one day, when a tired Heather put her to bed. "Baby, I will not take a vacation in the nearest time, and I won't let you go to another city alone. It's a long way with no direct routes. You'll have to go through the regional centre with connections, and we can't invite them here. There's only one room and nowhere to sleep. Let's wait until summer. I'll get a vacation, and you'll be on break. We'll buy you all sorts of goodies and go for a whole week," promised Heather as she covered Iris with a blanket. The school year flew by quickly. Iris tried very hard and finished it without a single B to please her mother, who, as a reward, promised to go on vacation to visit Peter and Simon. But one tragedy changed everything for that little family. There was an accident at the plant, releasing poisonous chlorine gas. Several people were taken to the hospital with severe poisoning, including Heather. Peter arrived late in the evening. He was so disturbed by what had happened that the small vein on his temple kept throbbing, and it even seemed like it might tear through his thin, tanned skin. "My little girl, come on, don't cry. Your mum's going to be fine. You know what good doctors we have here. They'll cure her quickly." The former neighbour tried to calm Iris down. "Now, we'll pack your backpack, and you will come to us. You know how happy Simon will be. You can stay with us all summer. We'll go fishing and pick strawberries. We'll make jam and bring it to your mum. She'll get better right away, you'll see." Peter's kind and calm voice soothed the girl a little. She hugged him around the neck and, through her tears, said, "You are the best of all. And why aren't you my daddy?" The forester was so moved by these words that he turned away and wiped a tear from his rough, slightly unshaven cheek. "I'm too old to be your daddy, but grandfather is easy," Peter answered cheerfully. Taking the girl's hand, he hurried to the door. "Come on, let's run or we'll miss the bus." "My Simon is probably hungry. He never eats without me. He's grown a lot this year, taller than me, and wears size 43 shoes. He's into sports. He does the most pull-ups in class and runs faster than his peers. And he misses you and your mum very much. You are dear to us no matter what." Heather's recovery was slow. She spent the first week in intensive care under oxygen. Iris asked her father Peter to call the hospital regularly, but the answer was always the same. "Heather can't talk. She is in the intensive care unit." Simon and Peter did their best to comfort the girl, but by the end of the second week, Iris was completely disheartened. She cried all the time and couldn't sleep at night. "What if Mummy doesn't get better? Promise me you won't put me in an orphanage. Mum often talked about her childhood in the orphanage, and her eyes were so sad." Then the girl would start crying, and Peter and Simon couldn't calm her down. One day at the end of June, the phone rang in their apartment. Iris and Simon had gone to the river for a swim, and only Peter was in the apartment. "Hello, yes, I'm Heather's friend. Did something happen? Well, thank God. When can I talk to her? Her daughter is distressed. No, we're out of town and can't get there until tomorrow. What's the emergency? Yes, I understand. Can you tell me which clinic in the capital is the best place to take her? Yes, I realize it's a matter of finances. We'll do everything possible to make Heather well." After this difficult conversation, Peter rushed out of the apartment. The forestry chief listened attentively, scratched his almost bald neck, and said, "I can't give the whole sum, but my wife and I have been saving for a cruise, and for the sake of a worker like you, We can rest in the village at my mother-in-law's house. Don't worry, we'll make it. By the way, since you're going to sell your summer house, our accountant wanted to buy one. Heather had a huge lung damage, and without modern medical equipment, expensive drugs and proper care, she was at best threatened with disability. The clinic in the capital promised to put her back on her feet, but it cost a huge amount of money. The chemical company where the accident occurred also allocated money for the treatment and rehabilitation of its injured employees, but it was only enough for treatment in local hospitals. Iris spent the whole summer at Peter's house while her mother was being treated in the capital and then in the local hospital. Peter sold his summer house and his car to pay for the treatment. Nothing, Simon, money is junk, but helping a good person is worth a lot. Look how happy Iris is. She's waiting for her mum. She will be discharged in a couple of days. And you and I will be alone again, sighed Peter, and went to the kitchen to bake pancakes. Heather arrived only a week later, and Iris's happiness was unbelievable. Although her mother still looked very weak and sickly, Iris did not leave her side. "Mum, let's live here. I don't want to go back to that town," begged the girl. "Heather, you could stay here. Simon and I will live in the same room, and I'd give you a bigger room. We don't need much. I'm in the forest all day long, and you'll find some work here too. You can't go to that factory with your lungs. There's only chemistry there, and you need clean air and nutrition. After all, my summer house—" Peter hesitated at the last words. He sold the cottage to have extra money for treatment. "No, Peter," Heather answered. "I can't do that. I'll be transferred to another workshop. They pay a little less there, but there's no contact with chemicals. I'll be responsible for the factory territory from now on. I'll plant flowers and trim trees and shrubs, and it certainly won't affect my health. We have a tiny flat in the dormitory, and by the end of next year, a new house will be built for all those who suffered from the accident. We have to make our own way in life. I know you sold everything to get me into a good clinic in the capital. Peter, I can't make up for the sacrifices yet, but with time—" "Don't even think about it or I'll be offended. I didn't have an opportunity to take care of this summer house, so to prevent it from getting shabby, I sold it. And the car? To hell with it. I'm not much of a driver. I walk through the woods. As for Simon, he will grow up and he can buy himself a car and a summer house. He doesn't much like it either. He's all focused on training. Maybe he'll become a famous athlete or coach. So stop speaking about it. I wouldn't be afraid to give my life for you. I know what it's like for a child without a mother. There's my Simon, fed and clothed, but he misses his mother. You see how he is drawn to you and Iris, as if she were his sister." At the end of August, Heather began to head home. Iris kept urging her mother to stay here for good, but when the cab came to take them to the station, she said loudly and confidently, "When I grow up, I will definitely be rich and take Peter to live with me. I will treat him in the best hospitals so he will never die, just like my mum." Later, Peter often remembered her words. He thought of them when he fell into the wolf pit and broke 4 ribs, and when he and his son were evicted from their apartment to build a shopping centre. Peter had a pre-infarction then. For a man who had lived all his life in one place, it was too much before retirement to go to the outskirts of the city in a concrete box, where there was no park or garden, but only an expressway and a railroad junction. Meanwhile, the years have flown by, and Iris graduated from school. No matter how hard the doctors in the capital tried, they couldn't fully cure Heather, and every day she was accompanied by constant shortness of breath and eternal fatigue. "Mummy, I'm going to learn further and be successful and rich. We'll often go to the sea. They say the sea cures many diseases, especially lung diseases. Be patient a little longer," Iris used to reassure her mother. She passed her final exams brilliantly and graduated with honours. The girl was going to enroll in the Faculty of Economics. No one doubted that Iris would definitely get in. Her class teacher predicted a great future for her if she didn't get lazy, and the girl had no intention of being lazy. She spent all her vacation reading books, studying with tutors, and attending various preparatory courses. For the past 5 or 6 years, she and her mother Heather no longer spent vacations in their hometown with her Peter and Simon. At first, they rarely called each other, and one day, when they dialed the number, a strange voice informed them that they had dialed the wrong number. Heather thought Peter didn't want to communicate anymore. On graduation day, Heather began to iron the folds of Iris's ball dress, though she found it difficult to do so because of her illness. "Mum, stop fiddling with this dress. It's perfect already. Please, put some hairspray on my hair. My nails aren't dry yet and I can't myself." "Mum, what's wrong with you?" "Oh my God, it's my fault. You're not supposed to breathe hairspray. And the nail polish smell. Where's your inhaler?" The ambulance took a long time. Mum was gasping for air with her mouth open and rolling her eyes fearfully. Neither the open window nor the inhaler helped. Heather was suffocating. Her lips turned blue, and she began to wheeze and convulse. The ambulance paramedic tried for a long time to resuscitate the woman who had stopped breathing, but all attempts were in vain. Heather died without ever seeing her daughter, rich and successful. Iris's class teacher was struggling to find the words that could bring back to life his favourite student. "You just don't give up, you hear? You can't give up. In a couple of weeks you'll be 18, and you'll be an adult. Being an adult means being strong and taking responsibility for your actions and life in general. What would your mum say if she knew she was the cause of your unfulfilled hopes? In her memory, you just have to go and pass your university exams. Not sit there silently staring at one point and crying for days and nights on end. Iris, prove that you are a worthy daughter of your mother. Don't betray her memory." The 2 weeks that had passed since her mother's death, Iris did not remember at all. She had hardly eaten or slept, and reacted neither to people nor to events, nor to the change of day and night. And then one day she woke up from a short and vivid dream. Her mummy was stroking her long thick hair, asking if she was ready to study at the university. Was she sure of herself? She had promised to bake her favourite blueberry pie if Iris passed the competition. After that dream, Iris promised herself that she would definitely enroll. And she did. "It was too easy. I was expecting something more complicated," Iris said dryly to her class teacher. "So, that's just great. But don't lose yourself. Read, prepare for your studies, repeat what you've learned. Studying will be much harder. University teachers won't chew every word like school teachers. You'll have to figure out many things on your own. Remember, you can always count on my help and support. I'm an old man, and most likely your graduation was the last of my teaching career. What's an old man to do when he retires? Right, communicate with their beloved students. So don't be shy, call me any time. I'm in touch." Then he shook Iris's hand and with a clumsy, old man's gait went away. Now Iris was a student at a prestigious university. The girl moved to the regional city and stayed in a student dormitory. The scholarship was only enough for travel to the university, and the pension, appointed after her mother's death, covered only 1 week of living expenses, eating just bread and milk. So Iris firmly decided to work part-time in the evenings. Then a convenient opportunity arose. Walking once from the library to the dormitory, Iris saw an ad on a lamppost. "Need an au pair for an elderly sick person." The girl immediately called it. On the other end of the line, a young and very pleasant baritone answered, "Yes, this is my ad. I'm looking for an assistant for my grandfather. I lived with him, but now I have frequent long business trips, and my grandfather is disabled and needs help. You don't need to sit with him. Just go to the store a couple of times a week, cook meals and clean the apartment. I will pay well. Grandpa is an old-school man, that can be a bit difficult to deal with, so patience and the ability not to give in to his provocations will be required. If you agree, you can come today to meet your ward. I am leaving on a business trip in a couple of days." Iris agreed without hesitation. Such luck! Employment only a couple of times a week and good money. But she had no idea what was ahead of her. Arriving at the place, Iris did not immediately orient herself. The houses on the street were arranged in a chaotic order, as if someone was deliberately trying to confuse people looking for a certain address. Right after the 6th house was the 11th, and the 8th, which Iris was looking for, seemed to have disappeared. "Could you tell me where the house number 8 is? I'm completely confused," Iris asked an elderly woman of a very strange appearance. Over a bright red cloak with a huge scarf of fine patterned knitting with tassels at the edges. On her head she wore a grey hat with tucked edges and a brooch on the brim. The woman was wearing half boots with numerous buttons along an oblique line, fashionable at the beginning of the last century. "The 8th house is on the other side of the street, next to the former laundry. Oh, what am I explaining to you? The laundry was closed in 76. You weren't even born yet. Come on, I'll walk you out. Who lives in this house?" "I know all the old tenants. My mother was a concierge until 81. Yes, she lived until she was 96 years old and had good memory and judgment because she socialized only with intelligent people. And then all sorts of trash started coming to the house. Disposable singers, doctors of science who brought their titles for money, and artists who created some kind of ointment. Of the old ones, only Mrs. Benneth, the newspaper correspondent, and Miss Collins, a ballerina from the local theatre, remained there. She still teaches ballet, even though she is over 80. Oh yes, and that nasty old man from the 2nd floor, Mr. Brightmeyer, a military doctor with the rank of colonel, by the way. He wasn't always so harmful, but when his wife left our world he shut himself off and only occasionally mumbled hello, as if he was doing us a favour with his greeting. But he hasn't been out for 5 years. At first his daughter looked after him, a nice woman. They say she remarried and went abroad. Now his grandson looks after him. He's hired nurses, but just imagine, not a single one stayed more than a week. That's why his grandson isn't married. He's always away at his grandfather's or on business trips. He's an important engineer for modern equipment, something to do with weather, satellites. Anyway, he's intelligent. Well, here we are. Aren't you hired to look after this grandfather?" the elderly lady asked sceptically. "Yes, that's precisely what it is. I need the money badly. I don't have any relatives and I'm studying, and here I can earn something. It's better than being a waitress or a cleaner. I also have to go to lectures and study. A free schedule is just what I need." "Then good luck," the elderly woman said incredulously and pointed to the house. The girl went up to the 2nd floor, fixed her hair, and hesitantly pressed the bell button. The door was opened by a man in his 30s, but with bald spots and a small dark beard. If it weren't for his thick-rimmed glasses, he could be called handsome. "Hello? Are you from the ad? Come in. I'll introduce you to my grandfather. But don't say no right away. He's nice. He's just very lonely." "Grandpa, I found you a good assistant. She's a student and a very nice girl. Don't make such a gloomy face. You know very well that I will not leave you completely unattended. And a nice girl is better than some tedious old lady nurse, or always in a hurry social worker. You know how to cook soup and make porridge, don't you?" addressed the man to Iris. "I'm a great cook. My mother was ill for a long time and I learned to do everything myself," answered the girl, and even blushed, ashamed of her own praise. "My God, I didn't even introduce myself. My name is Clyde. And how do I call you?" "Iris? Great. It's a pleasure. This is my grandfather, Mr. Brightmeyer, a military doctor, colonel, and an excellent man, though at first glance very strict. I think you'll find a common language. I would like that very much. I'm leaving the day after tomorrow, and if you hadn't responded to my announcement, another person would have flown on a business trip. And this is my development. And I wouldn't want it to be supervised by someone that is not particularly interested in my brainchild. Iris, I need your help for 2 weeks. Well, 3 at the most. My gratitude will know no bounds. That's an advance and money for food. The fridge is full. Grandpa doesn't eat much, but he likes good hot food. He can heat it up, but he can't cook it. Here are the second keys and a list of medicines to buy. He knows when to take his medication and takes it regularly. After all, he's a doctor. Well, I got to pick up my tickets at the office and pack my stuff. I live 2 blocks away, so I'll see you again if you stay until tonight. With these words, Clyde kissed his grandfather on the forehead and jumped out the door. Tell me, my dear, why do you need a stupid old man? Clyde has no choice. My apartment is in the centre, and it's a prestigious neighbourhood. Academics and professionals used to live here. A well-known pianist was my neighbour. Good memory to him. How much money did my grandson promise you? Don't be afraid, I'm strict, but I notice good people right away. There was a madam before you, a bore and a fool. I can't stand fools, but you're a smart lady, since you're studying. That's commendable. Well, at least go cook me dinner. Clyde bought a chicken. I like legs and wings in sour cream with potatoes. I'm tired. I'm going to take a nap. When you leave, don't slam the door too hard. The new neighbours have a 1-year-old baby. Cranky as hell. With these words, Mr. Brightmeyer went to his room, leaving Iris in a kind of prostration. Both the grandson and the lady from the neighbourhood described the old doctor as a man rude and resentful of people, but he turned out to be quite a nice old man. Having prepared dinner, Iris was about to leave, but noticed that the dust on the furniture had not been wiped for several days, and the floor in the hallway was trampled, as if a platoon of soldiers had come in dirty shoes. Having put the apartment in elementary order, the girl didn't notice how dark it got, and a fine drizzling rain began to fall. At about 7 in the evening, Mr. Brightmeyer came out of his room. My goodness, are you still here? Do you live far away? Wait, soon Clyde will come. He'll drive you home. I bought him a new car last year. Let him work it off. You're so fast. Dinner is ready and the apartment is shining. No one's ever helped me like that. They come for an hour, cook some edible, dust the corners with a brush, and then they're gone. You know what? Stay for dinner. Clyde promised to buy me some cognac on his departure. The key rattled in the keyhole. Iris, are you still here? And how it smells delicious. I'm so hungry. Let's have dinner together and I'll take you where you need to go, cheerfully ordered Clyde as he took out a bottle of American cognac from his briefcase. Well, what did I say? Although he is a slob, he fulfills my requests faithfully, said the grandfather with a smile and went to the room for shot glasses. And you, Iris, are a great person. That's what I sincerely appreciate in my grandfather. He recognizes people at once. He's the god of eloquence tonight. His attitude towards his other assistants ended with a rude greeting and a similar farewell. Did he tell you that I only care about him because of the apartment? That's what he tells everyone. I just love him. He's a bore, but he's a kind man at heart and he knows how to be grateful. You come on Saturday now. Nothing will happen to him in 3 days, and I won't leave until Friday. An hour later, Iris sat next to Clyde in the passenger seat of the car and listened to his quiet and pleasant baritone. She never paid much attention to men, especially much older than herself, but this time she caught herself thinking that she really liked sitting next to the man and listening to his cheerful chatter. Clyde was gone for more than a month and a half. He called often and apologized for being late. He always found time to thank Iris and ask his grandfather about his health. Clyde has forgotten about a normal life with his work, complained his grandfather. No wife, no fiancé, no free time. At his age, I already had a daughter of 10 and a son. Clyde's father, 7. He and his wife died in the mountains. They were vacationing there, skiing. An avalanche be damned. 18 years already. Clyde was only 13 at the time. After they died, he withdrew into himself. I was afraid that the boy would die from depression, and then he joined some club at school and started to make robots. and he liked it so much that after school he went to university and started doing the same thing. And he was so fascinated by it that he spent his days and nights in his technical laboratory. No, he had girls at first, but now, I don't know. He came here once with Holly, their employee. She was nice, but she was skinny and didn't talk much. I don't know what they have now, but he doesn't come with her any more. One day, while talking like this, Mr. Brightmeyer fell asleep in his chair. Iris washed the dishes and was about to leave when the door opened quietly and Clyde entered. He looked thin and exhausted. "Hi, I just got off the plane. How's Grandpa? He fell asleep in his chair again, didn't he? Well, let him sleep. You can get to your dorm on your own, or if you like you can stay here. There are 4 rooms," Clyde offered while unpacking his suitcase. "No, not at all. I have a seminar tomorrow and I still need time to prepare. I'll be here by the weekend," Iris said as she left her ward's apartment. Seeing Clyde, she really wanted to stay, to listen to his pleasant voice all evening, to look into his eyes through the lenses of his bulky glasses and just enjoy his presence. It's a kind of insanity. I thought about him the whole time he was gone. Maybe this is the love that everyone talks about and writes about in books, thought Iris, while riding the tram to her dormitory. Mr. Brightmeyer died on the eve of another year since the death of Clyde's parents. That day the grandson took his grandfather to the cemetery, and then they memorialized them at home in a small circle. Mr. Brightmeyer, Clyde, Iris, and Clyde's aunt Megan, who flew in from abroad every year on the anniversary of the death of her brother and his wife. "Look at this girl. She's smart, beautiful, and an excellent hostess. And I think she's in love with you," Megan advised her nephew when they were alone after seeing Iris off and putting grandfather to bed. "Is she in love with me? What makes you think that?" "I didn't see a single hint of it. Yes, she's kind, efficient, and grateful, but nothing more. And to be honest, I've been interested in her as a woman for a long time, but the age difference doesn't allow me to even hint at it. She's 19. I'm 32. She must have a boyfriend. Or, what do you call it now? Boyfriend, lover. I wouldn't mind having such a young and kind wife, but how do I know she will reciprocate my feelings? I would really hate to be rejected." Megan and her nephew chatted until almost midnight. At the first hour, Clyde decided to check on his grandfather before heading home for the night. Mr. Brightmeyer was cold, meaning he passed away right after the memorial dinner. He was buried next to his son and daughter-in-law with all honours. Iris wept to her heart's content. During these few months, she had become so attached to the old man that she also began to call him grandfather. Not many people came to the memorial meal for the old colonel of the medical service. Many of his friends and colleagues were no longer alive, and not many of his students remained in the city, mostly those who preferred military medicine to commercial medicine, and the old man could not stand such people, and they knew it. But the old doctor was more or less tolerant of one of his favourite pupils, who had great hopes but still preferred a more contented life. His name was Justin Graham, and he created his clinic from scratch, being still quite a young general practitioner, and in a couple of years raised it to such a level that he invited prominent doctors from the capital to perform complex operations and train the staff to work on new modern equipment. In its time, the working capacity and determination of the young doctor amazed even Mr. Brightmeyer. He prophesied a great future for him in military medicine, but Justin Graham had offended him greatly by choosing his own path after his internship. "And who is this young lady?" Justin asked Megan right after the wake. "Don't even think about getting her into bed with you, you old lecher," replied Mr. Brightmeyer's daughter ironically. "She is Daddy's nurse and au pair. She studies economics at the university. By the way, she's very clever and decent too. I'd like her to marry Clyde. Otherwise, he'll remain a bum with his science." "Come on, I'm not old at all. Clyde and I are the same age, and I'm only a year older than him. And about the lecture, That's also very exaggerated. My wife left me when I was making a career, building a clinic, and was at work for weeks on end. Now, she kicks herself for that. She didn't believe in me, or in herself back then. But now she is married to the sales manager and I have my own clinic, said Justin with a chuckle. Can you not laugh? We buried a respectful and decent man today, Iris said sternly as she cleared the dishes from the table. I'm sorry, it won't happen again, Justin replied ingratiatingly and affectionately. She has a temper, he added quietly to himself, and in his beautiful brown eyes the lights of a hunter flashed. When almost everyone had left the houses, Iris got ready and Clyde, coming up to her, apologized for not being able to give her a ride. I'm sorry, I've had a few drinks. You know, my grandfather's death knocked me out. Let me call you a cab. Oh, no, I wouldn't trust such an attractive young lady to a strange cab driver. Iris, do you mind if I'm your personal driver for the day? Justin offered his services. It's probably not tactful to use you, but I'm so tired, and the day was so long and hard, that I can't refuse your offer, the girl answered politely. Iris, don't fall for the tricks of this ladies' man, Clyde warned, a little irritated, but with a slight smile, closing the door behind them. Justin Graham always got what he wanted. He was married to the daughter of an official from the Ministry of Health, and with his help he managed to get his own clinic. If his daughter had been far-sighted and not had an affair while her husband worked hard, she would now be swimming in luxury. But then suddenly her father was then kicked out of the ministry for abuse of position, and Justin quickly and painlessly formalized the divorce. Meanwhile, the clinic flourished. His mansion, in the most prestigious area of the city, was one of the most expensive and beautiful. He was loved by women for his cheerful, free-spirited disposition and attractive appearance. He never lied, not to friends, not to colleagues, not to women. This quality of his was also attractive. That's why, in the car, he proposed to Iris to meet, but without commitment. I'm a serious girl and I don't recognize free relationships. I will date only a man whom I will marry later, she answered decisively and got out of the car. And that was a challenge. Yes, Justin did not like to lose and treated the situation as a game, but seriously enough. After a month of courtship, flowers, expensive gifts and walks, Iris gave up. She completely lost her head, forgetting that she once liked Clyde. She even moved from A's to B's in some subjects, but she passed her first exams perfectly. Her only condition was that their wedding would take place only after graduation, and Justin agreed, for he himself had lost his head from love. As strange as it may seem, the wedding was modest. Iris insisted on it, and Justin, who didn't like to flaunt his wealth and was practical, immediately agreed to all her conditions. They lived well, and everyone thought, here is a good family, together in both sorrow and joy. But soon Iris began to build a career as an economist. As a result, Justin could hardly catch his wife at home because she was always at work. He offered her financial help, but she refused, saying a career built on someone else's money wouldn't bring satisfaction. A couple of years later, they started thinking about children. Iris, have you played with your career enough? Let's have another Iris, as smart and stubborn as you, Justin laughed and sarcastically suggested once. Why, let's do it. I have my own, albeit still small, consulting company that brings a stable income, and our children will be smart and beautiful as we are, Iris humorously replied, pouring her husband coffee. So today we come home early from work and work hard on this issue, Justin cheerfully suggested, finished his coffee, jumped into his car, and left for his clinic. After he left, Iris felt uneasy. She had been unprotected for many months, and the pregnancy wasn't happening. She even went to a doctor, but she didn't find any pathology, and advised her to ask her husband to get checked. No, Iris did not despair. She calculated cycles, identified favourable days for conception, took vitamins, ate right, and even did yoga. But all her efforts were in vain. She even remembered a relative on her father's side who was childless and thought it might be hereditary. Overall, her soul was in chaos, something she couldn't solve without her husband's help. "Iris, I'm home and burning with desire," Justin said cheerfully, taking off his shoes and jacket on the run. Iris was just warming up dinner. "We need to talk," she said dryly, and turning sharply, almost dropped the dish with warmed dinner on the floor. "You have no face on you. Is something wrong? Are you sick?" Justin tried to find out the reason for his wife's bad mood. "No, I'm not sick. I'm fine. I just want to find out if everything is all right with your health. I've been unprotected for months, and there's been no result. I had a checkup, and here's the doctor's report." Iris carelessly threw a file with medical documents and examination results on the kitchen table. "I don't understand. You went to the local clinic, where the doctors are unskilled, having a husband who owns the best private clinic in the city? Are you out of your mind? And now you're suggesting I go to that godforsaken place for a checkup? Or will you let me use professional services? I'm not going for a checkup. I'm fine. I take care of my health and get checked every 6 months. You're crazy. You've ruined my whole day." Iris had never seen her husband in such a state and almost cried at his words. It was their first serious quarrel in 5 years of living together. "Iris, do you know that I'm always honest with everyone?" he said tiredly. "Yes, I do. It's the quality that played a key role in our relationship. What's your point now?" Iris asked and became wary. "I have another woman, and she is expecting a child from me. I couldn't wait any longer. Almost 2 years of unsuccessful attempts. I suggested IVF, surrogacy, but you didn't see it that way. Your unsuccessful attempts to get pregnant and have a baby on your own are nothing short of arrogant. I'm sorry, but I've decided. Don't take it as a betrayal. I don't love that woman, but I've wanted children for a long time, and I'll have them at any cost." "And you're sure he's yours? I wouldn't jump to conclusions. A perfectly healthy and examined wife, whom you supposedly love, can't get pregnant by a husband who hasn't been examined. But the first woman you meet immediately got pregnant, and you didn't have a shadow of a doubt?" "I don't recognize you, Justin." Iris went into the other room and cried. Then she quietly packed her things and left her husband the same evening. For several months, Iris lived in a rented apartment a couple of blocks from work. The problems heaped on her made her head spin, but strangely enough the business flourished. She was the first to file for divorce, although her husband begged her to reconsider her decision for a long time. He discovered, after the birth of the child, that he had nothing to do with it. A DNA test simply and briefly announced to the young father that his share of paternity was 0. After the test, Justin underwent an examination, and it turned out that he was the cause of their conception troubles. But it was treatable. However, it was impossible to rewind time and beg for Iris's forgiveness. As a man of integrity, he gave her a good cut, and Iris opened a branch of her firm in another city and went headlong into work. "Ben, urgently to my office," Iris called to her best business assistant and simply the smartest employee. "I need to find someone urgently. His name is Peter. Jesus, what's his full name? Oh, yes, Peter Tull. I will write you the address where my mum and I used to live. Maybe they moved or changed their phone number. Also, he had a son named Simon, and he worked as a forester and was always on the honour board. He had a scar on his arm from a burn, and in general, there must have been many burns, I just don't remember where. He's over 70 now, or rather 75. That's all I know. Find them. Don't be shy with the money," Iris almost shouted. addressing the man who was writing down all the information on Peter on a tablet. Days passed, and the private detective, who was charged with the search, had not yet found either the old forester or his son. The apartment building was demolished for dilapidation, and the residents were dispersed to different parts of the town. The forestry really remembered their heroic employee and even pointed to his new address, but he wasn't found there either. The apartment was sold, and where the former tenants had moved to, neither the new occupants nor the neighbours knew. The former head of the forestry, an old but still reasonable man, remembered that there was some tragedy with the forester's son, and they had gone to the region for treatment. After that, their trail was lost. Iris hadn't found peace for more than a week. She wanted to find the man to whom she owed a lot. Was he poor and in need of help, or was he in danger, and he and Simon were in a difficult situation? "Mummy, sweetheart, help me. Our Peter and Simon are in trouble." Iris always sought her mother's help and memory when it was extremely difficult for her. No matter how mystical it sounded, almost always the only clever solution that solved all problems immediately came to her. Suddenly the phone rang. Iris grabbed the receiver as if it were a hot frying pan with a burning pancake. "Yes, I'm listening. Have you found him?" "My God, this isn't a neighbourhood, it's a slum. How did they get there?" "I'm on my way. Don't tell them anything. Just let them stay where they are." The sight in front of her was terrible. Peter's dwelling was a one-story barrack with crumbling plaster, resembling the skeleton of a huge rotting animal with bare ribs picked clean by scavengers. The detective met Iris at the porch, although it was hardly a porch, just a metal frame and fallen steps. The detective gave Iris a hand to help her avoid twisting her ankle on the threshold, and let her go forward with the words, "First floor, door on the left," before following her inside. The front door was a shriveled, shabby mess with sodden panelling, looking more like chaotic art than an entrance to a home. There was no apartment number or bell. Iris knocked cautiously and touched the doorknob. The door opened with an awful creaking sound. The room was clean, but so squalid it made Iris want to cry. In the hallway was an absurd nightstand with some old magazines on it. Beneath the nightstand were several pairs of shoes, as shabby and as worn as the dwelling itself. Next to the nightstand hung a khaki-coloured raincoat, the kind worn by people who had to be outdoors in all kinds of weather. Peter always wore such a cloak when he went into the woods in the fall. "Is anyone in the house?" Iris called out to the inhabitants of this terrible place, and tried to move further, but immediately ran into a large box in the dark corridor, either from under the refrigerator or some other large equipment. "Who's there?" Iris heard a painfully familiar, slightly creaky voice. "Are you from the social office? I'm waiting for you. I haven't even locked the door for 2 days." The darkness of the corridor was broken by light from the second hallway, which led to the only room in the apartment. "Come in, lady. I'll take Simon to the kitchen now. How about some tea? I've got some molasses tea. It's good. And I brought lemon cookies yesterday. Simon likes them very much." The old man kept talking, and Iris stood in the hallway, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Why are you crying, lady? Don't be so upset. We're doing fine. We just need to get prescriptions for strong painkillers on time, because my son screams from pain at night. They don't care at the polyclinic, and I'll come straight to you, to the Social Security office. There's a kind woman there, so she promised that one of these days they'll come to us and help us with everything. Shall I give you a cup of tea?" "Yes, and I would also like lemon cookies too. I've loved them since childhood. My name is Iris, by the way," Iris answered, sobbing, and sat down at the kitchen table. "Oh, lady, we had a neighbour girl in town when we used to live with Simon called Iris. She could eat 1/2 kilo of these same cookies at a time, and she was so small herself. How could she fit 1/2 kilo in her? She was a funny little girl,
like a daughter to me. I don't know where she and her mum are now. Here's your tea."
Iris took a sip of the hot drink, took a bite of a lemon cookie, and cried, "Please forgive me for forgetting you. You've always been like family to me." The old man stepped back a couple of steps and put on his glasses, which hung around his neck on a small, stretched rubber band.
"Iris, is that you? It can't be."
Then he ran sharply around the kitchen table, almost knocking over the same box Iris had stumbled on, and ran into the room.
"Simon, look who's here! I'm going to lose my mind."
Then he appeared from the shadows of the hallway, pushing, with difficulty, a huge wheelchair. In it sat a bearded man in a plaid shirt, with a plaid over his paralysed legs. The man was emaciated and absolutely indifferent to what was happening.
"That's Simon, Iris. Do you remember him? He had such a terrible accident. He was a trucker. He wanted to make a lot of money. He had a beautiful wife."
The old man stopped, half-heartedly, apparently touching on a subject that should not be raised in the presence of his son.
"He was driving home at night in a great hurry to see his wife, when a fancy car flew towards him at breakneck speed. It was wiggling like it was trying to draw a snake with its wheels. Simon realized that there would be no space left from the car if he crushed it with his truck, so he tried to turn to the side of the road. It was raining, and he was carried into the ditch. The truck overturned, but that shameless driver didn't care. He drove on. Witnesses of the accident stopped him after 500 meters, pulled him out of the car by his chest, and he could not stand on his feet. There was a case of beer and a couple of bottles of whiskey on the back seat. He drunkenly said that he was rushing to go to his friends, and that they were waiting for him, and he didn't care that my son had suffered because of his fault."
"Was there a trial?" asked Iris.
"There was, of course. The expert examination indicated that he was sober, and eyewitnesses mistook lemonade for beer and Coca-Cola for whiskey. They erased his video recorder, saying it was defective. You know, he is a respected man, assistant to the deputy."
Iris sat there and couldn't believe her ears. Then she called her assistant. "Ben, I need to see all my lawyers and take all available funds out of the accounts. Contact Justin Graham. Yes, with my ex. Let him prepare a place in his clinic and call for consultation with traumatologists and neurosurgeons of the capital. He will not refuse me." Iris gave out orders, nervously eating lemon cookies one by one. The funds, withdrawn from all accounts, were enough only for the operation in the leading clinic in the capital. There was no money for rehabilitation. Our heroine had invested everything in opening a third branch. People were hired and they had to pay salaries. Iris took a loan against the security of the apartment and the car. "That should be enough, but this deputy's assistant will now pay for everything." The way he was spinning when he and the investigators, the prosecutor and the judge were nailed to the wall. Did you see their fat faces? Iris commented cheerfully, events that occurred during the past month. Well done to that eyewitness, who didn't give the cops his recorder and kept the record. We should thank him for not resisting these moral freaks in uniform. Ben, call Simon's firm. Tell them to drop the lawsuit, or I'll give them such an audit that bankruptcy will seem like manna from heaven. Let them collect from the real party responsible for the accident. 6 months after the spinal surgery, Simon took his first steps. "Iris, you're a naughty girl. You pestered me with your whims when I was a kid, and now you've got me down to my liver. I'm still weak, it's hard for me to walk. Give me time," begged her old childhood friend. But Iris tugged him by the sleeve of his shirt, demanding that he do not sit around, and kept his exercises. Peter cried at every meeting and said, "Iris, you are an angel that came down to us from heaven. I will pray to God for your welfare and health for the rest of my life. I wish your dead mother could see what a miracle she had raised." "Let's go to the sea.
I promised your father as a baby that I would be rich and cure him and my mum from any disease. And we'll all go to the sea together. It's a pity that my mum didn't live to see it," Iris finished sadly, and put 3 tickets on the table. "I have 2 cats and a stray dog, so she will somehow survive my absence, but my animals will not," answered Peter to Iris's offer, and retreated to the kitchen to feed his animals. He had noticed long ago, back in the rehabilitation clinic, that there were feelings between the young people which were clearly different from friendship. He didn't want to disturb them. A year passed. "You know, when I was confined to the wheelchair and bent over in pain, I had a vision of my mother, either in a dream or in reality. I didn't know her at all, only from the pictures that were in our house, but it was definitely her. She told me that I was not forever tied to a wheelchair, and that a woman would come and take me from it, and she would be my destiny. It's weird, isn't it? Like our loved ones wanted us to be together." "What else did your mum tell you? Didn't she tell you we were having twins?" Laughing, Iris asked, and ran her finger over her beloved's face. "She did, and they will be sons, and they will be the most beautiful, smartest and kindest guys. But then they'll have a sister who will constantly pester them with her whims, like I was pestered by one nasty girl on the 1st floor when I was a kid. And they'll immediately stop being the kindest boys. I love you. We're going to make it work. By the way, how do you know it's twins? Did you go to the ultrasound without me? Don't tell my dad yet. It'll be a surprise."